too, but we are going to give Krystle the full floor, so keep your questions for afterwards. All right, Krystle, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Lindsay, for that wonderful introduction. I'm really excited to be here tonight. Just getting this set up really quick. All right, can everyone see my screen?
Not yet.
Not yet.
There we go. If you want to put it in presentation.
Yep, my computer's slowing down a bit, so give me a second.
Sure.
There we go. Okay, can everyone see the full screen? Wonderful. So yeah, I decided to create a new presentation for you guys. So this is the very first time I'm presenting this. But I think it's really important since you guys already know a lot about native bees, especially since what I've seen already tonight. I thought it would be really important to talk about telling a story through conservation photography because you guys can clearly already take photos and a lot of you are really good at identifying bees. So I thought, hey, maybe this would be helpful. Um, but yeah, just a little bit about myself. And this seems to be going a little slow for some reason. Hmm. Okay, it's not going to the next slide. Oh, there we go. Okay. So a little bit about myself. Again, my name is Krystle. I live in Los Angeles, California, and I primarily photograph bees here as well. So you can actually see me in California in the upper left-hand picture. Center picture, clearly not California. That's Belize. There's no pyramids here. So I do travel a little bit out of the state as well. Also, the upper right-hand picture is in a cloud forest in Colombia. So primarily what I do is I photograph bees, the plants that they have relationships with, as well as the ecosystems that they live in. So, a lot of times, especially in California, I'll visit these ecosystems year after year, and I have an Excel sheet that I update. I keep track of things like times, dates, and weather just to see what changes year after year, and it's a really great way to check um, how they're thriving or possibly not thriving. And also, it's kind of a cool way that I've actually started tracking how climate change is affecting them. So really cool. Okay, we transition to the next slide with one click. So I'm really happy. But yeah, I want to bring up Olivia Messinger Carroll. And she is, I consider, the first militologist that I befriended. And I think without her, I probably wouldn't be where I am today because she was just so friendly and welcoming. So I really wanted to highlight her. And I feel like this is something that I really want to, I guess, bring forward with other people as well because she was so open and welcoming with me. I guess this happens a lot when people have a very niche interest. If someone reaches out to them, they're really enthusiastic about it. So I reached out to her and we had this hours long conversation about bees. And it's been years now, and she's still one of my very good friends. But it was actually because of her that I got this list of how many bees were in the world. So before talking to her, I knew there were some native bees, but not really how many there were. So she actually told me that there were over 20,000 species of bees in the world. And since then, I've found out there's an estimated 24,000 species of bees. And the United States is 4,000, Western US is 3,000. California alone, she actually counted, has 1,643 species of bees. So that's 8% of all of the species in the world are here in California. And what's really amazing about that is our state is almost on par with the entire with France, with Argentina, the bee numbers, and the entire continent of Australia. And Olivia was actually the one who counted these numbers. And right after she gave them to me, I was like, that's a lot of bees in California. I had this thought I wanted to see if I can get every single letter in the alphabet. So that's actually what inspired this book. So the book that just came out last month has 26 letters in it, one letter, each letter is a species that's native to California. So I'm going to break down a few points for you guys throughout this presentation, which is just obviously, again, telling a story through conservation photography. So the main points that I'm going to hit on are think of the story in arcs, not just single images, and also show connection and emotion. Also, respecting and collaborating. That means respecting the subject that you're photographing as well as the ecosystem. And then collaborating with people who might be an expert in that specific genus or species that you're specifically working on, and also acknowledging them and have a purpose. So, a lot of times when people are still telling a story, they start with a purpose and then they go from there. But a lot of times when you're photographing bees, you don't really know what the purpose of your story is initially. So you go out there, you photograph the bees, and the story just kind of starts to unfold around you. So I think it's really important to just be authentic with the story you're telling and be realistic. And I like to leave the story open so people can get invested and involved after. So hopefully that encourages more people to get into community science. And then I also want to include things like context. So those are locations, not necessarily the exact locations, because I don't want people to find where some of these really rare bees are, but you include dates, things like time, weather, things like that. So I'm going to go through this with an initial story to break this down. So you're going to include story arcs, not just images. So at the beginning, you want to set the scene, introduce the environment. This is the IB for my book. So initially, my friend Paloma posted this photo of her yard on Instagram. And I'd been friends with her for a little while, but I didn't know she had a native yard, or well, mostly native yard. And as soon as she posted this photo, I was like, hey, can I come over and just see what bees are in your yard? And she said, of course, yes. So I came over, and this is one of the first photos that I took. And her yard was much more expansive than I originally thought it was. And you can see she even has a rain barrel there too. So she collects rainwater and uses that during times of drought. But you also want to show relationships between human and nature. So it's not just a yard, it's a place where family spends time. These people all live there. And you could tell they spend a lot of time in the yard. This is when it was a little bit more groomed. You could see they have a fire pit there that they like to sit in. And what's really cool is even in the fire pit, you could see bare patches of soil and there's bees nesting there. Not only that, they had chickens, and their kids like to spend a lot of time with the chickens in the yard. So, yeah, you want to introduce the environment, but you also want to introduce the subject. So, who's the subject? Usually, I introduce the subject if they have a relationship with the plants by the plant initially. And this is a California poppy, and they had so many poppies in their yard. And when I visited, I saw this bee. This is a rare slash uncommon bee called a Perdita interrupta, or a California fairy bee. And this was really amazing because I'd never seen this bee before. It was pretty uncommon, but the males, basically their whole life cycle when they're adults is just hanging out on a flower and trying to find a female to mate with. So I avoid disturbing wildlife. I don't touch any of the bees while I'm out there photographing them. I just let them do their thing. One way I'm able to photograph them so well is because I learn their behaviors and adjust the way I'm acting to their behaviors to accommodate them. But I also want to credit and collaborate experts. So, for example, this is Zachary M. Portman, who is a Perdita expert. And he was the one who initially helped me ID this bee. And I also got a lot of information about this bee from him. And he was also the one that told me this was a rare slash uncommon bee. So shout out to Zachary Portman. And what's really cool is the females, they collect pollen exclusively from this flower. So you can see a female Perdita going into a tripod stance. She has some pollen on her chest that she's scooping up off her chest. She's wetting it with her mandibles and she's packing it on her back legs. That's called wet pollen packing. Some Perdita also dry pollen pack as well, but that's less common. And yeah, so when the females show up, so the males just try to mate with her. So you see a lot of mating taking place on the flowers too, while the females are foraging, which is what's happening here. But you also want to present any new information. So an example of that is with this flower. So an interesting thing about poppies is they only produce pollen, but not nectar. So historically, with the Perdita interrupta, it was said that they collect pollen only from the poppies, but then they drink nectar exclusively from this flower, which is a cryptantha or a popcorn flower. But when I was actually at Paloma's yard, I saw them visiting other flowers. So they were drinking from chamomile and marigolds, and that's new information that you can add, and it's opportunity for this took place in someone's yard, so any community scientist could see this and maybe write a note or maybe start on a paper to expand on this. And what I think is really important about this yard is it wasn't just a home for Paloma and her family or the bees, it was also an entire ecosystem. So you'd see little things like this lizard, the sidewalk lizard hanging out in the yard. Middle of the story, you want to show conflict or tension. So one way I do this is by showing moments of vulnerability, care, or resilience. So an example, this is actually, they live in an area of California called Arcadia, which is in the urban wildlife interface. So I was always worried what would happen if Paloma and her family decided to move one day. Would their yard be turned into a green lawn and these bees would have no place to live? But it never crossed my mind, even though it was so close to the mountains, that they might have to worry about fire. And they actually lost their home this year in January to the fires. And this was the day after their house burned down. You can actually still see some of the flames coming up in the center there from the gas line. So you want to offer resolution or hope. So less than a month after their house burned down, they actually, I think I forgot to mention this, they created that habitat they created was a chaparral habitat, which imitated the ecosystem that was naturally in the area. And chaparral habitats naturally come back after fires. And because they've done such a good job with this, that's exactly what started happening in their yards. Things started sprouting up again. And when I saw this, I was like, you know what? I wonder if the bees are going to come back. So I visited a couple of times, and these bees show up in March, April every year. And I went back right on schedule. These bees, like phoenixes, literally rose from the ashes, they're ground nesting bees, and returned to the poppies. So this was a male bee sitting on a poppy, like his like the bees he descended from had done the years and years before them. And I think this is a really good picture that highlights the bee, the flower, the blooming of the garden or the flowers around them, as well as you can see the house in the background. And what's really interesting about this as well is I've been visiting their yard for a few years. I started in, I think, 2022, 2023. And I had photographed 14 species of bees, but going back this year, I actually photographed a 15 species, and it was a parasitic bee, which was really cool. So the garden is still expanding and evolving, and it's still there. And in about 4.5 years, Paloma and her family plan to return as well. So this authenticity is key. So when you're telling a story, just present the facts, but try to create that emotional connection between your photos, your story, and just to get people interested.
Crystal, could I
So
pause you for just one moment? Um,
sure.
I can see gray boxes on your screen. So
Oh,
before we do anything, don't quit out of the sharing. We'll
okay.
troubleshoot real quick. Can I get Crystal made as co-host? Let's see if that fixes it. If not, then we'll have to go into your settings, Crystal.
Oh no. It's just you didn't see any photos?
We can see it. There's just three rectangles randomly on the screen, kind of cutting off the presentation.
Oh, weird.
Yeah,
Do I need to stop the share?
no.
Those might be title blocks or something that we're not seeing.
Yeah, so they're the Zoom controls. Zoom is goofy like
Wait,
that.
okay, let
If
me
you screen
hide the
share,
floating controls.
when you screen share, if you don't select the box to show video, if you leave those boxes unchecked, the gray boxes
Mm,
not show up.
okay, let me stop the share and try this again.
Yeah, Crystal, we're still able to see your presentation quite well. It's just those bars were on the outskirts
Oh,
of the screen. So
okay,
they
so
cut
I
out a little
have,
bit of the text, but we were able to get
yeah, well,
mostly
I'm
everything.
glad.
Yes.
So I don't have optimized for video sharing checked. Should I check that or should it leave it unchecked?
No, it'll definitely leave it unchecked.
Okay, so yeah, that wasn't checked.
Oh, okay. That's interesting.
Is there something else I should try?
Just try again. Maybe it'll be better.
Okay. Okay, that's so interesting.
Yeah, it's a very difficult thing to resolve. Usually it's like a setting, but there's different, like it's seen differently on my computer. Sometimes if you're made co-host, it goes away. Who knows?
Okay. Did you send me a co-host request? I didn't get anything as far
I
as I
did.
saw.
Let me do it again. Make, ooh, I sent it, but let's try this again. I'm going to revoke it and then send it again. Um,
Okay.
where did you go? There you are. There you are.
Yeah, and Brandy has a good suggestion in the chat too, to maybe try
Oh,
hiding the floating meeting controls.
those were hidden.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know then.
I don't see that on co-host though.
It's just an automatic thing. You are co-host.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. All right. Okay, let's try this again. Oops, let me go back down. Okay, do you see the gray boxes?
Yes, but they're smaller and it's not
Oh,
covering much at all.
oh, okay. That's so interesting. Are they in the middle of the screen or are they to the left or the right of the screen?
Top left and bottom right, just a smidgen compared to before though. So Crystal,
Oh,
if you want to move forward, I think
I will definitely do that. Yeah, I'm not sure what that is. Okay,
yeah. Thank you for trying.
no problem. Yeah, thanks for letting me know too. Okay, so have a purpose. I was saying before, start. A lot of times people say start with a purpose, but a lot of times with bees, when you're telling their stories, it's kind of hard to initially find that. So I like to find a purpose or something that draws people in. It could be in the middle of the story, it could be kind of at the end, but whatever it is, that's what really gets people emotionally invested because a lot of times with entomology or militology, you can spew out a bunch of facts, but it's that emotional link that personally I feel really draws people into your story and into saving ecosystems. There we go. So, why does your story matter? Again, that's an emotional connection. And who needs to see it? And what do I want them to do after? So, me personally, I try to cast a wide net as possible. So that's why I tell a story of the yard, of the house, of the bees as well, of the other creatures in the ecosystem, because I really love bees, but other things might attract other people as well. And what do you want them to do after? This one there could have been multiple things. It could be like plant your own native yard, have it match the ecosystem around it, tell the story of what was happening to the area and how they lost their house but they're coming back and the bees are doing the exact same thing. So I'm going to give you a couple of other examples that these are all in the book as well. um, oh, also forgot this as well. So you want to balance beauty with reality. So the images and text should work together. The way I like to photograph bees, it's not as just an object, but as showing behavior. So they have a personality that you can see that comes through in all of the photos and give background that can't be seen. So for this example, Paloma introduced a native yard, what was there before. So in this case, I could talk about how it was just a green lawn. There wasn't really anything inhabiting there. So that's just something that you would use in your words, but not necessarily photos because you couldn't take them. And then again, provide things like names, dates, and places. All right, so this is another example of a story. I'm going to not cut it out as much, but hopefully you see the through line with this. So this is the Santa Monica Mountains, which is one of my favorite places to hike. And I typically visit very early in the year. And this is what it looks like. It's really lush, green, and beautiful. This is actually the Cistern Trail, if anyone's been there before. But starting in January, it's just really green and lush. And I started visiting, I think it was 2021 and photographed this bee. And this is an absolutely beautiful bee. It's called an Osmia montana quadriceps. Really easy bee to identify because very dark black, but also has a blue metallic sheen, which you can see a little bit there on the abdomen, and very, very large mandibles. Really beautiful bee. And I had been going to this little area on the side of the road there and just photographing this species. And one thing that was really interesting about it was I could not figure out what the males looked like. Even in the key, there were a lot of males that were visiting this exact location that looked really similar. And these bees, particularly, I was like, okay, these look most like the female, besides their obviously huge mohawks. And I ended up having to seek help from an expert. And this photo is actually what helped me identify the bee. So Molly Reitmeyer is a Osmia bee expert, and I didn't include a photo of her here because she does not have any photos of her online. So I think maybe she wants to keep that private. So just to respect that, there's no photos of her. But this one particular photo, I'd actually taken a series of 3 photos. So there's one photo before this, one photo after it. This was the middle photo. And there was a feature that you can see right here called a labum. This bee has the longest or the largest labum of any Osmia species in California. And it was just this single frame. And thanks to Molly's expertise, that I was able to confirm the ID of this male bee. So, as far as I'm aware, these are the only series of photos where the male bee has actually been identified to species. But again, that's with help from Molly Reitmeyer. And what's really interesting about this area is it's such a biodiverse, beautiful ecosystem that it's just so beautiful. So many people have started moving in. This is what a lot of neighborhoods in the area look like. But it gets dry very early in the year, starting around June, late June, July. So it looks like this. And climate change is really exacerbating it. So, what a lot of the people who are living in those neighborhoods are asking is for a conservancy to actually go through and cut down a lot of the native plants in the name of fire abatement. So, the area that I've been visiting, I went back, there was the 4th of July weekend, 2021, and all of the plants that I'd been photographing bees on had been cut down by tractors. And you could see the tire tracks in the ground there. And what was really sad about this is starting in, I think, January, February to 4th of July weekend, I photographed over 40 species of bees in this area, and they had all disappeared. So I wanted to show you guys, hopefully none of these are blocked by the gray squares, but these are some of the bees that I'd photographed at that area, and none of them have returned. I've actually been to this location year after year and have not seen a single bee. But yeah, this is an example of what's happening with habitat loss due to human involvement. But one thing that I say that's really important to highlight is there's always options for them to come back. And this is the Wallace-Annenberg crossing, which is going to be completed next year. And I was talking a little bit about native landscaping bridges before, where they're sort of a metaphorical bridge where you have native plants in your yard, but you also encourage your neighbors to plant native plants. And these bees have places to travel along to increase biodiversity of their genetic biodiversity. But yeah, this is a physical landscaping bridge that can also possibly do the same thing. And here it is under construction. This could be a bridge that connects one side of the Santa Monica Mountains to the other because the freeway is a huge barrier. The next place I want to talk about is the Central Valley of California. This is an absolutely beautiful area. I love visiting. But if you look at the plants there, those are invasive grasses, and there's mustard. There's coastal live oaks, which are native, but it's just mainly these non-native grasses. And even the water there, that's actually an aquifer, which is not naturally supposed to be there, even though it is still really beautiful. But this is what a lot of the Central Valley is supposed to look like. This is Carrizo Plains. I took this photo in 2023, and it's one of the few remaining grasslands of the Central Valley. And I bring up this area because I talk about a farm that is located in Helm, California. This is Don Cameron, who is the director of the farm, along with his dog Lily. So a lot of times when people think of farming, they think of monocrops, destroying native habitats, which is really what they do, because that's what happened in the Central Valley. But Don has started incorporating native ecosystem practices into his farming, and that's just by planting pollinator habitats and hedgerows, like the one that he's standing in front of. This is elderberry, and they're doing amazing things with this. They're making jam out of it. They're making teas. They're also collecting seeds as well and selling them to other farms and people to create their own habitats. So the hedgerows are huge on this farm. There are miles and miles of them. And what's really amazing is there's so many different creatures that are living in them. So I've seen birds, rodents, also lagomorphs like rabbits, and so many different bee species, wasp, flies, so many amazing creatures. Here's some mallows in front of a tomato field, and I was looking for bees here. This is actually where I photographed the U bee, Anthophora urbana. However, I wanted to highlight this bee because I think it's a really cool story. This is a Perdita heliotropii and didn't make it to the book because I already had an HB, but I think this one's so fascinating because this bee, the female, only collects pollen from heliotrope flowers, and no one planted heliotrope flowers at this farm because they created an ecosystem. There were possibly birds or maybe rodents doing seed dispersal from visiting other locations, and they dispersed the seed from this heliotrope to this farm, and this bee that has a relationship with it showed up, and there's a huge population of this perdita at the farm, and it's really amazing. And I guess it brings me to kind of it's a so dunes. I saw this bee there, which is actually the HB from the book, the Anthophora halaluca, and I want to highlight this bee because it was at the Kelso Dunes, and it has a symbiotic relationship with Sorothamus, or smoke bushes and smoke trees, but there's no smoke bushes or smoke trees at the Kelso Dunes. So I wanted to see how far this bee was from the closest known sighting of Sorothamus. So I went online, did a lot of researching on iNaturalist, a whole bunch of different places for previous observations. And you can see here the bee was 7.14 miles from the closest known observation of Sorothamus. So bringing that back to the farm, how far did that perdita have to travel to find that habitat? This bee here, the Anthophora halaluca, is the size of a housefly, so it's really, really small. And I just think this is really cool information that like bees can definitely travel far to look for habitats. So it's a good reason to encourage people to plant native ecosystems because they have possibly less distance to travel between too. And yeah. So it brings me to Anza Borrego. This is another really cool story. I love Anza Borrego. This bee is called a Megachile brownie, and the photos that I've taken here are the first known photos of living representatives of their species. This is the bee in the book, and this one was really cool. So I was actually looking for that Anthophora halaluca again on this plant. I actually spent 2 years looking for it before I finally found it, but the day I found this Megachile brownie, I had photographed or had seen about 100 individual native bees visiting this plant. And when I went home, I actually talked to my friend James Hung, who's kind of a San Diego bee king expert, and he helped me identify or confirm this beta species. So one thing I really like to do, it's kind of fun, is I like to ID the bees myself and see if I got it right. And then I'll reach out to bee experts after, and if they confirm that I got it right, I'm like, it's kind of a proud moment. But he was also the one who actually told me that this was a bee that had only been seen twice post 2000. And before that, the observations were the 1980s and before. And I was like, you know what? I have to go back and photograph this bee. So I ended up going back a week later because at the time I had a 9 to 5 job and could not go back. Um, and throughout the week, it was like 110 degrees every single day. So it was really, really hot. And this is what the smoke bush, the Sorothamus, is supposed to look like. This is what it actually looked like. So this was taken in 2022. And it was the third year of just this massive drought that we had in California. So not a lot of things were blooming. It was a really interesting time to search for bees. So I ended up going back. I got there at sunrise because I was like, you know what, let me look for sleeping male bees. I always look for those guys first. This is what it looked like a little bit after I got there. I got there at 4 a.m. So I had to wait a few hours for the sun to start rising, but the dark clouds on the horizon. As soon as I stepped out of my car, I heard this really loud hum. I don't know if you guys know what that is. It's just honeybees. There were swarms of honeybees just on the few flowers of this plant. And it's something that you see happen a lot in nature, especially in drought years. It's honeybees competing with native pollinators. So you see it pretty much every year, but in drought years, it's really exacerbated because there's not a lot of flowering resources. And the bees that are in the US, the honeybees, they're multiple European species and one Africanized species. So that means they can show up really early in the morning when it's cooler, but they can also be out when it's really, really hot and stay till the evening. So they'll take a lot of the resources from the plants, and the native bees don't have the option of drinking from them. So I was really disappointed because it was just honeybees there. All the native bees that I'd seen the week before were completely gone. By the way, it was 117 this day I went back. It was just extremely hot. I think it was the 4th of July. Um, but yeah, no native bees, and I was just really disappointed. But then the dark clouds came directly over me and it started raining, and it rained for about 5 minutes, and the sound of the buzzing just completely disappeared. Went back in my car, and then as the clouds passed, you can kind of see it here, but a double rainbow appeared. And I went back to the bushes just to look around one more time and found this one Mega Kylie brownie drying herself off. And this was the only native bee that I actually saw that day. So this is an example of what's happening out in nature a lot. Competition with honeybees, extreme swings in climate change, and also community science. So I photographed the first living representative bee. And as the sky cleared, this bee flew away and the honeybees returned, and that was that loud hum. I spent a few more hours there and again just saw no other native bees. And I've actually returned every single year since I saw this bee, and this tree is in diapause. So there have been no flowers for the bees to return to. And I think one reason is this tree, typically you see them in like washes. So there's a lot of, we have winter rain. So we'll have rain in like maybe October, and then these should flower the next year. But this plant was actually not in a wash. It was just next to the side of the road. So there probably wasn't a high enough water table for it to flower again. But I hope the tree does flower again. I'm going to keep checking every single year and then hopefully see that bee one more time. And then this is the grasslands, again in California. So this is a restored grassland actually at Yellow Bypass in Davis County, or Davis, California area. And this bee is really cool. This is called the Brachynomata melanantha, and it was considered a lost species. So bees are considered lost species if they haven't been seen in 10 or more years. And this bee had actually not been seen since the 50s before I photographed it. So this is actually the M bee in the book. And the only reason I found this bee was because I was with my friend and in a grassland area, it was evening, and I always look for sleeping bees. So I was looking around to see what was there, and this one was 2 feet in front of my car. And this bee was so difficult to ID. It was actually kind of, it's a really cool story. Because I took photos of the wing venation. And typically with bees, you can ID them to tribe, you can ID them to genus with the wing venation. And I also knew that it was a kleptoparasitic bee, so it probably had a host species as well. But I could not figure out what kind of bee it was, even with the photos of the wing venation. I figured it was in the Apidae family because that's where most of the kleptoparasitic bees in California are, but just couldn't figure it out. So one thing I did to like try and help me figure it out was look at a possible host species. So I was looking at Anthophorella, but I couldn't find a single bee that had an Anthophorella as a host species. And I was like, okay, maybe I got the wrong species. And this is when it's a good idea to talk to the experts because they helped me solve this jigsaw puzzle. So James actually pointed out to me that this bee, the wing venation, is so unique you don't ID it to tribe or genus, you can ID it all the way to species, which is why I kept missing it. And then also John Asher ID'd the host bee to species for me. And this is actually when I found out that no one actually knew what the host species of this bee was. People guessed it was in the a specific tribe that the Anthophorella belonged to, but no one actually knew. So most bee science or study of bees is done through collecting. So it was just pan trapping. So people hadn't actually been studying this bee alive before. So I was the one through like multiple years of going back. I initially went in 2023. I found out that Anthophorella Chionora was actually the host species of this bee. So I got the first photos of living representatives, figured out what the host species was, and also expanded its range. But what was really interesting, the first year I could not find any female bees and was not sure why. And typically, when you want to look for the female parasitic bee, you look for the host species where they're nesting. And typically on patches of like hard compact soil, you look in the middle or you can look right near the edge of the plants, but I was not seeing the females nesting anywhere. So it took like a year and I was like, maybe they're nesting in the grass. And when I went back a year later, I did find them nesting in the grass and instantly found a female. One really interesting thing about the identification key for this bee is it basically said that the female looked like the female of another bee. And there was no description for what the female of this other bee looked like. So when I photographed this bee, again, it was the wing venation that helped me ID them to species. And another really interesting thing about this bee, this is what it typically looks like throughout the year. But during the winter months, it's actually in a floodplain. So the entire area floods, and the bee is actually developing underwater for about 4 to 5 months. This is an area of what it looks like at sunrise. This is what it looks like at sunset. You could see some of the gum plant in the foreground there. And the last story I want to tell is just a really simple story that's not in the book. But if you don't want to spend multiple years or days at a location, you can tell really simple, engaging stories through just a single visit. This actually takes place at Vasquez Rocks. Some people might be familiar with it because it's a beautiful place to hike, but also the WB seems to just love to film TV shows here. I know Buffy the Vampire Slayer, when they showed the first Slayer, it was shot here, and there's a lot of like alien abductions or alien crash landings here. But it was at this location I found this bee. It's a diadacia, and males sleep in flowers every night. So they go into the flowers before the mallow closes with the sun, and then the flowers open up again in the morning with the sunlight as well. And the bees fly out and they go throughout their lives. But what was really cool here, this is what you typically recognize as a diadacia. This is another one, the exact same species, but I think it's a really cool observation because it shows bees aging. Like you don't normally see aging in the insect world. And if you compare them, he's really fluffy and cute. And this guy has gone bald. The same thing happens to people. Not only that, his wings are really tattered. He was missing a little part of his antenna, but he was still able to climb into his like, comfy flower bed, just like all of the younger guys, and go to sleep every night. And I think it's a really amazing way to make a connection between insects as animals and insects and people, just showing that they sleep and that they age. And I just think it's really amazing that they can grow old in the insect world because this guy's got to be really, really tough to do that with all of the things coming at him every day. All right, so thank you so much.
Thank you. That was amazing. All right, so we will jump right into the Q&A. Folks, feel free